PCI. Here we are, finally into Holy Week, nearing the end of our Lenten study. We have spent these last 40 days diligently slowing down to consider our personal walks with Jesus, diving into the study of the 7 deadly sins, where we have taken one a week, we have defined it, saw how it practically plays out in our lives, and ultimately how Jesus is the one who frees us of that sin. And this morning we are actually ending by talking about pride. Now, pride can simply be defined as an excessive preoccupation with yourself. Another way of thinking about this is by seeing its other name used throughout history, and that is the name vainglory, which gives us a clearer picture of what the sin of pride is actually about. What I mean by that is today we use the word pride in a variety of ways, some of which is good and positive, like we are proud of our kids. We take great pride in our work. But other times it certainly carries the sinful connotation of vainglory. And some of the common ways vainglory shows up in our hearts is through self-promotion. Our desire to elevate or lift ourselves up so that others will praise us, recognize us, approve of us, and ultimately applaud us. Other times it's because we want to look impressive to others or be the center of attention. So we do things like diet, exercise, wear certain clothes, not just to look nice or try and be healthy, but because deep down we want to stir up in other people a desire for us, to pay attention to us, or to think higher of us. Other times it comes out because we just simply can't stand to be wrong. So we've learned how to become very defensive. We know how to shift the blame, explain it away, pass the buck, find excuses and rationalizations, because at the end of the day, all we want is to be right, and having nothing to do with the suggestion that we're not good enough, competent enough, or smart enough. However it comes out in our hearts, it is simply an excessive preoccupation with yourself. And what makes this sin particularly insidious is it has a fantastic ability to be able to hide itself. We can sense self-promotion, and we know settings in which it's not appropriate for this to come out. So what we do is we stroke our pride, not by self-promotion, but by self-demotion, putting ourselves down, turning to vain humility, fishing for sympathy or pity. However it comes out, it's still pride, just trading one form for another. It is still being excessively preoccupied with yourself. It comes in all forms, and it has this way about itself of actually getting stronger the more you try and beat it down yourself, which is probably why, historically speaking, it is considered the mother of all sin. That when you boil sin all the way down to one that seems to birth everything else, usually it's pride. It's no accident that you go all the way back to the beginning in Genesis with Adam and Eve, that their very first sin is that they wanted to be like God. It's no accident that when Satan comes to Jesus in the wilderness, his strategy is to find some piece of pride to appeal to in Jesus. So whether it's throwing yourself off the temple to impress people, or the fact that all kingdoms of all the world will come and bow down before him. It's no accident that the night before Jesus' crucifixion, in the upper room as Jesus gathered his disciples, it is actually the pride that comes spilling out of the heart of Peter. If you remember John 13, Jesus is celebrating the Passover with his 12 disciples, and at one point during the night, he girds himself up with a towel and starts washing their feet. And as he's working his way down the table, he gets to Peter, and Peter says, No, Lord, you're not going to wash my feet," which ultimately is a cry of a heart that is filled with pride, because he's essentially saying to Jesus, you are the head of the table. You're the master. You're the Lord. You're the teacher. Show some self-respect. What are you doing getting down and washing our feet? That's what the lowly do. That's what servants do. To which Jesus responds with, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Now, what is Jesus saying? He's contrasting two different kinds of washing. The first is a kind for the body, using water to wash dirt off your skin, which is what Jesus is doing here. The second takes place on the inside with the inner person, which the heart is cleansed from sin, in which Jesus himself will do the next day through the cross. And Jesus uses the first kind of washing as a kind of picture for the second. So in the same way that he's pouring out water this evening, the very next day he's going to be pouring out his blood to wash away the sin of the heart. And that act of lowly service which pictures for the disciples the servant-hearted character of Jesus, that he's willing to die for them on the cross. That is actually what makes the pride in our hearts begin to crumble. And it does so in a couple different ways. The first is, when you look at your feet, so to speak, it's hard to be proud. When Jesus gets down and starts washing their feet and tells them that he's gonna die on the cross because their hearts are so filthy and dirty with sin, it has a way of humbling you, because you recognize just how dirty you are. You realize how filthy you are. You realize how sinful you are. But in another sense, it also produces humility, because we see the full extent of his love being expressed in the upper room, and even more so on the cross. We see the God of creation now becoming a towel-girded servant. We see the God who's ushering in his kingdom now becoming a crucified Messiah. And when you begin to see the face of Jesus, who would lower himself to wash your feet, when you see the full extent of his love that drove him to the cross, truthfully, it's a little hard to be full of yourself. And as you begin to see the servantness and low-hearted nature of Jesus, who would wash your feet, who would die on a cross for you, that's actually what begins to change you. Not just by deconstructing the pride in your heart, but also by beginning to shape you and mold you into the very image of Jesus himself. Which is why Jesus goes on to say in John 13, as you have seen me wash your feet, so now go and wash the feet of others. In other words, to truly and experientially be washed by Jesus, that is what transforms us and changes us to become like him, to become lowly like him, to become humble like him, to become a servant of others just like him. You know, C.S. Lewis once said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And oftentimes we think that humility is moving from self-promotion to self-demotion, but it's not. Because the common denominator of all is still yourself at the center. But when we understand what Jesus has done for us, up in the upper room and out there on Calvary Hill, we see that the issue is not going from self-promotion to self-demotion. The issue is going from preoccupied with yourself to being preoccupied for others. From being self-centered to being other-centered. From going to seek our own glory to now going to seek the glory of God himself. So as we see the power of this picture in John 13, how we are ultimately freed from the snare of pride, my challenge to you this week is very fitting with the events that take place during Holy Week. And that is, I want you to spend all week in John 13. Read it, memorize it, pray it, soak it, take your time in this text. Ask the Holy Spirit to show you Jesus, and ask the Holy Spirit to savor what Jesus has done in your own heart.